challenge with my work has been I have so many different things I want to involve myself in. Artists generally get known for one thing and make their career out of that one thing, and I just never could do it. I opened a business downtown called Leaper Woodwork, and the idea at first was to build looms, and I built 2 of them before I realized it was pretty hard to make any money making looms. I'd say I spent my first 6 or 7 years just learning how to put wood together and doing commissions for people and copying things from the masters, people that I really appreciated their work.
Our first exhibit with Don was in August of 1979 here at Childhood's End Gallery. He had collaborated with another local artist, Tom Lind, who did flat glass, stained glass. And they made some beautiful cabinets together and large screens with just exquisite woodwork.
Well, then it was just whatever anybody came in with. And there was a series of pieces until one day Fred Gentry, the lawyer, walked in and ordered a teak table for his dining room. Their house is a museum of my work, but this is when I started to do things that were my own style. A lot of it was developed working for the Gentrys. My wife and I had started a business, and we had 2 kids, and we were starting to feel a little like we were having a standard American life, and we decided, let's go to New Zealand for a year. And I went to New Zealand. And while I was there, I found a little college of fine woodworking in Christchurch that allowed me to use the studio and the machinery in trade for teaching some classes. I started making a chair, because that's what I'd always done, is make furniture. And the guy at the next bench was making wood sculpture. And I was so fascinated with watching his process that one day I took apart what I was making into a chair and turned it into a sculpture. And it had this effect on me that I started making sculpture. One of the things that really inspired me in New Zealand was that there was a show of Maori artifacts that were touring the country at all the museums at that time. And I was very inspired by the quality of those artifacts and how beautiful they were, but they were also mostly weapons. And I wanted to come up with a style of sculpture that looked like they could be tools that could be used for something but weren't weapons. And so the first sculptures all followed that sort of, how do I make something that looks like you could use it for something? So there's my furniture background is showing up again. So that has infused my woodwork ever since. This was the second of my New Zealand sculptures. It's called Artifact 2. And this one I drew it before I carved it. It's made out of New Zealand matai. And it's one of the first ones that I wanted to make an obvious connection. So this piece is just lashed on here with a series of twine that's holding it. After that one came this one, and this one got me thinking about, this actually has a way that it kind of fits with the body. There's a sense that there's something you would do with this that would be like this, maybe an instrument or something. And again, it has this, just like my table, there's a sense that it's 2 pieces that are joined together. There's some beautiful carving, like it's for something, but we don't know what. Then when I came back, intriguingly, the next period was much about poetry. I went to a Robert Bly men's conference. I wrote my first poem, and he liked it. Robert Bly liked the poem and asked for a copy of it. And so I started paying a lot of attention to poetry. Also happened to be a time within a couple of years I was getting divorced, and so it was a time of a lot of emotional work, which is great for poetry. And so I started publishing books. As part of that, I went back to school, finished my undergraduate degree, and got an MFA in creative writing and literature.
I've been following his writing for probably 35 or 40 years. And it's interesting to me that even though he went to graduate school somewhere in the middle of that and really developed a lot, and I think has written more poems since he went to school and developed a community of poetry.
So this takes the best of all these books I've done before, and then there's a bunch of new pieces in here. And so I still read from that, and I always have new poems coming out.
It's his ideas. More than the poetry, it's his ideas. And he has so much depth that he gives you a little poem, but I want to ask questions because I know there's 100 miles of outstanding stuff behind that.
We're always looking for the poem that rises above, and I'd say I have a couple of them that for me, every time I read them, they bring on this strong emotion, but they don't all do that.
Okay, this poem, Raise the Sun, is very Don Freas. This is a poem about how you, the reader, are totally responsible in the world. And could I read some of it? What if the sun wouldn't rise unless you were watching? What if all that light and heat reached all places seeking your palms, hoping to find them upraised and welcome?
And what if the sun, having found you attentive, having found your open hands, could settle in and illuminate one more day? What if you were what the sun wanted?
What if it were up to you?
Would that be a privilege? Could you love enough to warm the side of a planet? Would the sun find you waiting each day, no matter what might come?
He's like a teacher.
I was showing furniture again in galleries in Seattle and here at Childhood's End.
I met Don through his work, through a sculptor. I ran into it in Seattle in a gallery, and I was showing close by. And then when I met him at his house because of his poetry, I recognized the piece.
I had just finished an office for a local gentleman who wanted a big desk and a filing cabinet. And I had these boards left over. This top was one board 20 feet long. And I cut it in half and put it side by side with itself. It's a beautiful look. The chairs, I always admired the shaker chairs that you could actually slide them underneath the table when they weren't in use. And in this case, I just wanted to have those backs float. And so this was how the experiment came out. SPSCC, South Puget Sound Community College, used to have a program where you could come in and use the equipment on the weekends. Artists could come in and use it. And I came in there for a couple of years while that program was still in operation. And all they required was to take one beginning welding class, which was rudimentary, but did the job. And a lot of the same processes that you use, where it's important to prepare each part carefully, just like with woodwork. Just like with poetry, for that matter, you want every stanza to have a solid feel to it. It's a lot of that same craftsmanship. You just have to get good at the tools and good at the processes. One of the things that was great about the SPSCC shop was that they had benders. And there was a wonderful big rolling bender. And they had shears. You could slice off pipe into rings. And I can remember really clearly the first of the ring dance sculptures. I had about 15 15 or 16 rings from maybe a foot in diameter to about 3 feet in diameter. And one day I just said, okay, you gotta just go for it. And so I found an angle that I could put them together, and I welded it. And then I got another ring. I said, okay, now if those two are there, what would look good here? And I would just keep holding things together until I liked what I was seeing, one ring at a time. Olympia offers that plinth project where they put out a call to people to offer a sculpture that would be downtown on the Percival Landing for a year.
Plinth is actually a term for a pedestal, a sculpture pedestal. They're 3 feet by 3 feet, all of them, but they range in height from 18 inches to 48 inches.
I decided I would make another ring dance sculpture that would fit on the plinth.
So this piece was called Ring Dance, and it was a series of galvanized rings that had a great sense of movement and flow to them. It's a tall piece, maybe 6 or 7 feet, and then you put it on a 3-foot pedestal and you've got a 10-foot tall piece. The PBIA, the Parking Business Improvement Area, which is a city business owner committee, made that purchase from the collection of loaned artwork, and then Ring Dance came to land permanently in front of dumpster values on 4th Avenue. The second, third, and fourth pieces he did were really distinguished by their color. They're eye-poppingly red. They all had this sense of movement and flow to them. And so when we get a piece of color, it really stands out.
Then I had sculptures on those plinths for about the next 5 years. Most of those pieces are here in my own sculpture garden. My favorite sculpture is the 11th in the Ring Dance series. I decided that some of the rings at the base would appear to be going underground. And so I think of number 11 as actually extending all the way to the center of the earth.
The project that Don did for us in West Olympia is the Tree Guard bicycle rack projects. So Don's project is called Scenes from West Side, and they're really lovely vignettes of some of the architecture and scenes that you would see in West Olympia.
There's some really characteristic West Side houses that are very unusual. So one of the Tree Guards had like an image of that house.
The very distinctive houses, I think, on Rogers Street, they came from a kit. That roof line is included in one of the vignettes, and families holding hands and walking together and animals, and it's just a very lovely sort of love letter to West Olympia.
I had a wonderful show at Childhood's End once, and so many of the pieces I had around, I wasn't even sure if they were finished yet because I didn't know what they were supposed to look like. And it was great for my process to go, yeah, well, you got to have a show, so finish these up and put some oil on them and show them and see how people like them. And it was amazing.
There was a very nice exhibit in 2005 of his sculptural pieces.
These pieces were very abstract. As I say, they were just put together based on gluing things together and then smoothing surfaces and looking for the curves, the natural curves of things. I have no idea what shape that would ultimately take, but that's the fun, that's the discovery of it.
The pieces were really well received. People spent a lot of time trying to understand them, reading the title, going back, having conversations about the work, which is just the best when you have a gallery exhibition that really engages the public and people are very curious about the work. People would come back multiple times and ask us what we thought things meant. So it was really an engaging experience.
The best thing for me in the last 8 years has been the landscape. I bought this old homestead on the shores of Puget Sound here that had an old orchard and it had an old wrecked house on it and it had a lot of junk. But one of the main things is that it has a 50-tree orchard up there. Some of the trees are 100 years old. There are some wonderful specimens. There's a huge giant sequoia tree, 108 feet tall last time I measured it, and there's a redwood up there. And I had never been a gardener before, but something about cleaning this place up, building a house and studio, and the ongoing process of taking care of 2¼ acres, that some of which is forest and some of which is orchard and some is lawn, you know. That has been a project that will probably last the rest of my life. And when I see the different stages, the different shifts I went through, I'm always totally surprised that I've ended up where I have.
Don leads an artful and art-filled life.
When I talk about the depth and the need to explore that he has, there is no other choice that he has because he is so diverse. He does have so many points of view.
I think that's part of the job with an artist, is just to keep putting it out there, and there will be those grace notes that just rise above everything else. It won't be the same piece for everybody, but there's always something. It's taking that risk of, you might get it wrong, you know, it might not work, but it seems so important to do something, you know, take a step. But and then there's always another step, always something else that could be done. So the creativity always has a place to be used.